Good evening. Tonight I want to start off in Genesis chapter 4. Adam and Eve are now out of the Garden of Eden. And so chapter 4, verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. That line I love that line. It kind of tickles me. I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. It's not her procuring a mate. She's in the wonder of childbirth. She has brought forth life with the help of the Lord. Now think back to the last session where God said, you are cursed and you will have pain in childbirth. And think of her reaction here. She's so focused on the joy of childbirth. I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Really, the curse of God doesn't seem like the curse because she is relishing in the joy of motherhood. Going on to verse 2. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Now, one of the things that people have kind of talked about, what's the meaning of this story, and why in this story, what's the moral of God accepting one offering but rejecting the other? There's an idea of first fruits that's woven throughout Scripture, and it's very hard for us to understand these days because we have fruits and vegetables and meat available to us year-round. We aren't relying upon the crops that we have worked hard for. We go down to the grocery store and get fruits and vegetables whenever we need them. Think back to a time, maybe, have you ever grown tomatoes? I remember when we had tomatoes when I was a little girl, and when those first tomatoes would ripen, I was given a wet washcloth and a shaker of salt, and I would just wipe off the tomato and eat them in the garden, kind of warm from the sun. And man, nothing tasted as good as those first tomatoes on the vine. And part of that was because you had waited for a whole year for those first fruits, the first of the harvest. And no, we never relied solely. We still could have gotten tomatoes at the store, but of course, store tomatoes don't ever taste as good as garden tomatoes. We didn't rely solely on them for food, but think if you were relying only on your crops and those first fruits started to ripen, or the harvest was getting ready to come due, and the first wave, you don't know if there's going to be anything else that comes. At any moment, you could have a hailstorm or fire or something that destroyed your crops. And so the first fruits, that first of the harvest, were precious because you weren't sure that anything else was going to come about. And so whenever someone gave their first fruits to God, that was a symbol of trust and reliance upon God, because you didn't know if there would be anything else to eat for the rest of the season. And so a gift of first fruits was this: I'm putting my trust and faith in God, and the very best of this crop I'm giving to God. Without knowing what else may be, I'm giving the very best to God. Now, in this passage of Scripture, it really indicates that Abel gave one of the firstborn sheep to God, and it doesn't make that distinction for Cain. Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. Abel brought the firstlings of the flock. So Abel brought the firstborn sheep of the flock, and Cain brought some of the fruit. And so therein probably lies the difference, and that's the distinction the Bible makes. We will go on with this story tomorrow and hope to see you tomorrow evening. Thanks for joining me.